Howdy, it's Jim Arado, and this is late February 2022. We're at the Abraham Lincoln Museum on the campus of Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this is, this is just a great museum. Really rivals just about anything Lincoln related elsewhere. They've done a good job here. And they closed for renovation, I want to say in 2018, actually before COVID. And they've recently reopened. Actually, I think several months before our trip here, they reopened. We were here. It was on the day they closed, the last day they were open before closing up for renovations, and they have really remodeled quite a bit. I believe where we're standing now, we're pretty close to it. They kind of had a gift shop area, and that's no longer here. They don't have a gift shop now, which I think is not a good thing because I like to spend money at gift shops and nice museums. But yeah, anyway, I'll talk a little bit about what's going on. Feel free to pause and read the little cards if you want. I was thinking about just reading those and making this a straight up museum tour, but I can talk about Lincoln all day long. And yeah, there's a lot going on with this place. This is a great museum. I think it's $6 to do the tour, and it's easily well worth it. There's a little front section here just strictly about the college and some of its early history and how it was founded. And Union General Oliver Howard had a huge hand in getting this place established. Colonel Sanders there's a little thing on Colonel Sanders. He donated some money to get this museum going. And the college itself, forget the Lincoln Museum, the college has some really interesting history. It's right by the Cumberland Gap. Literally just a few miles from the Cumberland Gap National Park Visitor Center. If you're going to be in the Cumberland Gap area, there's no reason not to stop here and make this part of your trip. And a nice little view out the window there. It mentions the changing views of the area since the Civil War. Yeah, and you've got Middlesboro right here. You've got this great museum. You've got the Cumberland Gap, and just a great area full of history and full of stuff to do. That's still, it's definitely not Gatlinburg. And I love Gatlinburg, but this is kind of the anti-Gatlinburg. There's just not a crowd here, and you still get a lot of history and nature. We were just looking at some other books in another case there. I wanted to mention a couple of them. There's Wilderness Road about the Cumberland Gap, and there's the Little Shepherd of Kingdom Come, which I just read recently. I think I read it on. I think it's in the public domain at this point. Some issues with political correctness in the book, but of course the book was written forever ago, and I enjoyed reading it, and I just wanted to mention that book. Nearby is a state park, Kingdom Come, named after that book. I want to check that out just because. But yeah, there were some books, some really cool history books written by local authors that became fairly significant as time went on. And by the way, I wanted to point out we just saw a couple of mortar shells that were recovered from the campus. They were Civil War mortar shells. One was discovered in 2001 and one was discovered in 2018. And just some more interesting relics of the area. Of course, none of this has anything to do with Abraham Lincoln. We haven't even gotten to the wonderful Lincoln items displayed here yet. And there are so many Lincoln sites all over, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and you can, California, South Dakota. There's plenty of other places where you can, DC, obviously. But yeah, this is just an interesting museum devoted to Lincoln here in Tennessee. It kind of moves the progression of his life. Some interesting art here. I was going to say when we were here back in, 2018 before they closed.
The family.
Man, it was a very festive day. They had cake They they had 50% off at the gift shop, and they had their archives open. They had kind of a vault room, and they were letting people go in and take little tours, and they were getting out the good stuff and showing you stuff that wasn't always on display. Oh, and speaking of good stuff, we just passed a corner cabinet made by Abraham Lincoln's father, and those are always great. But yeah, I remember they had I want to say a letter signed by General Lee. I think they also had a letter signed by Grant, and they had Ford's Theater, a Ford's Theater ticket, I believe, from the night Lincoln was assassinated. It was really exciting, and you can even ask the curator questions. And I asked him, what's have you ever turned down a donation? And he mentioned that there was an odd piece of art that somebody had painted. It was a painting, and it was not particularly attractive, and the artist offered it to the museum for $50,000. How generous! Anyway, they declined, but that was a real treat. I really enjoyed that. And speaking of art, I know on the second floor of the museum, which was closed off this particular day, I think they're still doing some renovations, but they have kind of some kind of pop art and more Lincoln related art and inspired art upstairs. So, but yeah, we'll keep looking around. Again, feel free to pause and check stuff out. Lots of interesting relics. I did see some Lincoln hair. Of course, every Lincoln related museum has the castings of his hands and his face, which I always think is cool. I did. There was a very nice lady watching the front desk while we were here, and she gave me a copy of the Lincoln Herald, which I believe is the quarterly publication. Maybe it's put out a couple times here. I'm not sure, but it's just the publication that the museum puts out. It's very scholarly, very interesting, and I was pretty grateful to get that. It's I might have to look into subscribing to that myself. It's a well done book, or I guess just a periodical. I know in this area the museum displays a really cool set of china that was used by the Lincolns in their Springfield home. Just I always love seeing stuff like that. Yeah, there we go. That they would have eaten off of that, and drinking from those cups. I also love these dioramas that they have. Kind of showing scenes from the Civil War and from Lincoln's life. I paint toy soldiers, and I just always enjoy looking at that sort of thing. Yeah, there's that china set. And of course, Abraham Lincoln was born here in Kentucky in Hodgenville. And there's the boyhood home and the birth site, which are fairly small. They're out of the way. They don't really get a ton of visitors. Not the way Springfield gets a lot of visitors. And then of course his family moved on to Indiana, over near Santa Claus. If you're doing a trip to Holiday World, you can definitely go and visit that national park site. Also, a state park site right beside it. They kind of go together. You really need to visit both if you're going to be in that area. A church that the family attended is still active. It's not the original building, but I believe the congregation, it's still kind of, basically the same church that he had attended. I believe his sister is buried there, and his mom is also buried there. And they have the foundation of the home where they lived. And then there's New Salem, which is maybe 30 minutes from Springfield. Kind of set up like a pioneer village. He lived there briefly. And then he lived in Springfield, Illinois, before he became president. And that town celebrates Lincoln to the nth degree. And we've visited Springfield many times. Yeah, I enjoy that town quite a bit. It's Gettysburg has been called Disney for Civil War enthusiasts. Springfield is Disney for Lincoln enthusiasts. Yeah, more great relics to check out. Lots of just informative boards. And I've seen these boards at other places too. I can't remember if I saw them on a traveling exhibit. I know I've seen almost these identical boards maybe at other museums. And there's a mention of Abe's hat, his famous hat that you see in a lot of well, not in a lot of pictures, but I guess depictions of him mention the hat. And I believe the Smithsonian Institute owns one hat that they know belonged to Lincoln. The Robert Todd Lincoln Home in Vermont, which I've got videos up about it elsewhere, they also own a hat. The Library and Museum in Springfield, I believe they still might have the hat. There was a controversial hat that they owned. The provenance of the hat was greatly questioned. But yeah, there's the face and hand casts. Lots and lots of art inspired by Abraham Lincoln. Just look at the pennies in your pocket, the $5 bill in your pocket. Look at Mount Rushmore. Do you see the Lincoln monument? There's Lincolns everywhere. Statues of Lincoln are also everywhere. And he's appeared in movies, comics, etc., etc. And of course, I could go on about Lincoln trivia all day long. Lincoln and the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, from the same state of Kentucky. I always wonder, I don't think there's any recorded face-to-face meeting between those two, but I can't help but think surely they met at some point, during their political careers before the South split off. Also, Jeff Davis went to Transylvania College here in Lexington. Mary Todd Lincoln is from Lexington. Both politically connected families. You also had John Hunt Morgan in Lexington. I always wonder, did Mary Todd Lincoln, or Mary Todd at the time, did she cross paths with Jefferson Davis or John Hunt Morgan? Again, I'm pretty sure there's no recorded incidences of that happening, but that's something I wonder about. And of course, the Lincolns were somewhat of a tortured family. They had 4 sons. Only one of them made it to adulthood. And of course, Mary had to deal with being right beside her husband when he was assassinated, and dealing with the death of all but one child. The one surviving child would later help with getting her put into an asylum. So there was obviously that rocky relationship with the one son that survived, and that's a whole discussion for another day. Yeah, some other random Lincoln trivia. You probably know U.S. Grant was supposed to be at Ford's Theater with Lincoln, but his wife wasn't exactly best friends with Mary, and they declined the invitation, or I guess accepted it and then later on kind of pulled out. Henry Rathbone would go in his place later on, along with his fiancée. Another bit of trivia about everybody sitting in the box with Lincoln at Ford's Theater. Everyone in that box would either die by the hand of man, or they would be in an insane asylum at some point. Just something to think about. And that would have been just a heavy, heavy time. A heavy moment for them. I read an interesting book recently about Boston Corbett, the man who would end up shooting John Wilkes Booth 12 days after the Lincoln assassination. Very interesting character. He actually did meet Abraham Lincoln once during the war. He was serving in the Civil War, of course. And yeah, he kind of disappears from the history books, but just an exceptionally interesting and strange person. And while we're right here, I wanted to mention that statue we're looking at right there that we just walked away from, the Council of War statue with Grant, Lincoln, and Stanton, I believe. Yeah, Edwin Stanton, by John Rogers. I love that statue. I think it's really cool. Robert Todd Lincoln felt it was the best depiction of his father. He was very proud of that. And I always think it looks like they're giving him Lincoln a haircut, but anyway. And then we just saw another statue just a second ago. Sorry, I'm lagging behind here. Yeah, the one of Lincoln standing in front of that chair. That is by Augustus St. Gaudens. And you've seen his work everywhere. He's done a lot of just great historic sculptings, I guess you would say. And there's a national park devoted to him up in New Hampshire. I've been there, and they have a copy of that. I always think it's interesting how they make copies of statues. And, you might have, I think there's only a couple of regular-sized versions of that statue in existence. And just the molding process and all that they go through to recreate some of that stuff, to me, is just really fascinating. And there's a little diorama there. I think I was reading the sign about how generous President Lincoln was with pardoning soldiers, especially if an execution was involved. Just always a compassionate fellow. And I know we zoomed past it a moment ago. I think I'm going to get it back in view here in a moment. There's a life mask of Lincoln. I think a lot of people sometimes think that's a death mask, but that's basically a plaster copy of his face that was made just a couple of months before his assassination. And just to look back over the room we were just in, you saw some stairs going up there. That's where they had some art at one time. And there's a note about Lincoln's stepmother. He was very close to her. Oh, and yeah, this is a great little case. There is actually a little bit of Lincoln's hair in this particular case, which I just think is wonderful. Yeah, but that bit of lock of hair is in that. It's in that picture there. If you look close, you'll see it towards the bottom. And it was cut, I believe, right after he was assassinated. Little bit more information about the assassination. Of course, his body was taken basically on a little tour through America by train, where they had large funerals in several big cities, and that ended in Springfield, Illinois. Here was another separate section of the museum. Man, and if you're into guns and firearms, and this was just a really nice display they had on some relics from the Civil War. Not specifically Lincoln related, but just some great items. Again, I paint soldiers. I love looking at this stuff for reference material. And they've actually got a lot of guns and pistols, rifles displayed in this exhibit. And I'm not a gun person myself. I grew up in western Kentucky. My dad was a gun person and hunted a lot, but I never was. I love these surgeon kits. Of course, I'm sure you know, if you know anything about the Civil War, the surgeons, quote surgeons, they weren't exactly medically trained doctors with years of experience. In some cases, they lucked into the job, and a lot of what they did involved just amputating. And you can read all sorts of stories about the surgeons amputating and just throwing limbs out windows. Pretty much every major battlefield and all the minor ones, you can read stories about that kind of thing. I love the med bottles. Of course, there's a saw right there. I love the old Civil War photographs too. There's a real difference between the Union and the Confederate photos taken during those periods. I think the Union soldiers often they're trying to look proud and distinguished. The Confederates are looking scrappy, and they've almost always got like a knife or a gun or something. They're trying to look tough, and they pull it off. My wife and I did a kind of a retro photo when we were in Gettysburg with Rob Gibson, and Rob, if you know much about Gettysburg and the local personalities, yeah, he's a bit of a celebrity himself. He's written some books. He's looks a little bit like John Wilkes Booth, and he has played John Wilkes Booth in some documentaries. And just an interesting guy. But he takes those old photos and he does them the way that they were done, in the 1860s. It's a kind of a treat. But we weren't sure if we wanted to go north or south in our photo. And actually, all the people, with the family tree stuff I've done, I've found Union soldiers in my past, but I have yet to find a Confederate. So we went north, and he did a really cool picture of us that I'm pretty proud of. So, especially when you look at the belts and the holsters and that kind of thing, it's kind of rare to get a good look at some of that stuff. And this is a really great collection of guns that we're looking at. One of the boards noted, I think 27,000 plus rifles were left on the battlefield at Gettysburg after that battle. And that tells you something right there, of course. And we're leaving the museum, and we actually took just a quick drive around Lincoln Memorial University, which is a school that I'm just becoming more of a fan of by the moment. I like what they're doing. And we just kind of drove up and down the road beside the college. I guess this is kind of their main campus. Just a short little walk from the museum. I'd like to go here on a day when they're offering tours of the college. I'd like to actually do a tour of the campus. I think they do on Monday through Friday, though, so that's... But yeah, I want to learn more about the college itself. Again, just because I like what they're doing. I know when we came and paid our admission to go into the museum, there was a very nice lady working the front desk who, you could just tell she enjoyed what she was doing. She was an alumni of the college, and she was pretty proud of being an alumni, so as she should be. But yeah, just a quick look at the college. Going back, driving towards the museum. And again, this is just a nice little town right beside Cumberland Gap National Park. That whole area. You really need to incorporate this into your Cumberland Gap road trip. Also, real close is a Gondolier restaurant. One of my favorite chain places. It's a small chain, mostly out of Tennessee, I believe, but they have a Gondolier here, and we like their Italian food and their desserts. So if you're in this area, stop there for some good food. But yeah, we're heading out. I hope you enjoyed that video. I probably went a little longer than I should have. Checking out the museum again, about to leave the whole campus here, and hopefully coming back again on another day, because again, I like being here a lot. Yeah, there's the museum, there's the town, and there's a cool Lincoln statue right there as we leave, greeting people or telling you bye as you leave. Yeah, but it's right off the road. If you're driving to the Cumberland Gap, you're gonna pass this. I mean, you're gonna be right by it. So check that out whenever you can. Oh, and real quick, I did want to add just a few pictures here at the end. This is from back in 2018 when the museum closed, and they had like a little celebration. There was a cake. Yeah, check that out. They had a cake. They were giving out cake and little treats like that. And there's some of the art that was displayed there when we were here previously that was not on display during this visit. Just some nice pieces there. And there is a Holy Grail piece, if there was one. That's a ticket to Ford's Theater on the night that Lincoln was assassinated. And that is Well, it's very exciting getting to stand next to something like that. And there was their archivist in their archives, and it was just really cool getting to peek back there and see what was there right before they closed.